Hey, good afternoon. Last video of the trip. It's Friday afternoon. We are in Vermilion County, Illinois, and this is a field for all those that followed us all week. I'm sure you think we cherry picked. This is a field we've been in before. This is the field we were supposed to stop at. Clearly, this has been a replanted field. The stand's about a little over 29,000 V4, and this area had a lot of rain. Lots of replants across the road. There's a field that's been partially replanted, and so this is what we are starting to see as you look at the middle third of Illinois. Just a real quick synopsis on Illinois. I would argue the top third of the state, full potential to be above average. That doesn't mean they don't need some rain, but they don't have nearly the holes. They're not really fighting as much of this unevenness that we see in the central part of the state. Center part of the state, I think we're going to have to hustle to be average. And that's maybe all we can expect in some of these fields. Now, we weren't in southern Illinois, but that part of the state's got probably the least amount of impact on state yields for Illinois. So that kind of concludes our Illinois portion of our tour. Let me give a shout out to all of our sponsors. Consolidated Grain and Barge in Jeffersonville, Indiana. Dawn Bencourt was very nice to let us be sponsored by her. Mike Meisenthal in New York with Clover Ag Risk Management. Obviously Jim Goss and myself and our clients, we certainly appreciate it with AG Farm Management and JP2 Risk Management. So let's talk about the trip. So since Tuesday morning when we left Jim's house in Mahomet, we have driven just a little over 1,900 miles. If you include the day on Monday when I came in from Jamestown, North Dakota, I'm pushing pretty much 2,600 miles in the last 5 days. So let's talk a couple things that were really jump out at us as we look back at our 4 days. Number one is how much of the crop that we saw is going to pollinate basically plus or minus from July 10th to July 20th. And some of the best areas in the country are going to all pollinate in that same 10-day window. Now, there's going to be some that's a couple days early and a couple days late, and certainly corn like this isn't going to pollinate then. But there's a lot of this corn that's going to pollinate in that window. Second thing, probably to be honest with everybody, even though we did not see any moisture stress in any of these fields, I'd say 40% of them are at risk that if they don't get adequate moisture, they are certainly going to take their top end yield out. There's some of these fields that we saw in Iowa and Minnesota that, man, you're going to have a hard time being less than 90% of a normal production, even if the weather's not good. So that's one thing. A couple things we also kind of got our arms around a little bit this week is how short the speculators are. That's something that historically, when they get to over 300,000 contracts short, you would argue, man, all we need is one thing to change the narrative on this, on these prices. This isn't about, we go on this trip not so much that we know what price direction is, but we just want to see what's the trend, and now we take the government information. And one of the things I'll say, out of the 5 states I was in, I think the government's got crop ratings about right. You're at 80% good to excellent in Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, and hey, the worst ratings in any major Corn Belt states, North Dakota, and I'll attest that did not look good. Illinois certainly got some issues, so that's something to keep an eye out. That weather window between the 10th and the 20th of July is our best chance of finding a story that maybe can help this market. So, secondly, populations, stands overall, we felt like we're down. And let's just say they were down 10%. And Jim's response to me, as somebody that doesn't know as much about agronomy, there's two reasons it was down. Number one, choice, economic choice. They just planted less corn per acre. And the second was weather. There was just enough cool weather, and sometimes water and cool, that they lost population. Overall, that wasn't down enough to replant a lot of corn in some of these states, but that certainly was in play. There was I know Jim tweeted, we didn't take a picture of that field, but we had a field in Iowa that was like 41,000 plus on plant population, as we look back and talk to some locals in that part of the world, that corn was likely going to be chopped for silage, not taken to grain. So keep, but if you look at the overall population, we were certainly down some. So let's talk a little bit about soybeans. I don't think there was a question that as a consistent, on that 1,900 miles we've driven, the consistency of the beans was outstanding. I mean, we're a long way to go, obviously, to know any kind of thing about yield, but the beans were more consistent in Illinois, and certainly no issues in the states that I talked about earlier that we think the corn's really good. The other thing we noticed, and we did not go on this trip a year ago due to some personal reasons, but the bean fields are cleaner than we've seen them in 17 or 18. Either the weed control is getting better, or they were able to get out on it sooner. But man, the beans were pretty clean for this stage in their growth. Only a couple fields that we happened to stop across from, and those were all the reason they weren't sprayed was because it's too wet. So I mean, that's that piece. So that's really our story. We'll probably put out some stuff. I had a couple clients ask about, well, now what's your marketing recommendations? We're going to take that offline, and we'll deliver those kind of things to you via maybe a follow-up email, tweet, or something else. But there's some things that we still have to be concerned about, but those are getting limited from what we saw. So we appreciate all our sponsors. I certainly appreciate Jim Goss and his help on this trip. And Jim, I don't know if you got anything else you want to add before we wrap up.
Yeah, I just reciprocate that thanks. I mean, this is a big trip to try to do by yourself, and I mean, obviously the filming of the videos is impossible to do by yourself. But I would say that when you're in my part of the world and you've looked at this kind of stuff all spring, it's easy to get wrapped up into, oh, everybody's is this way. And the reason we do this trip is partially for our own good, to see that is everybody that way or is everybody not. And I think what we came back is saying it sucks to be in East Central Illinois if you're worried about everybody being this way. It's just not. And it was our turn, and so that's the way it is. We'll work around it. We'll manage through it. We've still got awesome potential to make some money out here, and we don't know what yield is, and we're never going to know what yield is this time of year, but we certainly feel like we still got potential, and not to give up, even though people wanted us to come back and say, oh, things look as bad as they do in East Central Illinois. They just aren't, and it is what it is. So that's why we do this. So, but again, I'd like to say thanks to our sponsors as well. This takes a long time, and I mean, I assure you, we're ready for the trip to be over. It's a lot of miles and a lot of steps and a lot of walking around in mud and rain, and so it's nice to get out and see this. I do enjoy it each and every year.
Well, thanks again, Jim, and I'm ready. Well, I guess we can say we're glad we did it, but it's probably ready to be over. So look forward to maybe having some follow-up emails and tweets, and then we'll also, hey, if we go out again a year from now, and if somebody just has a burning desire to see America in about 4 days, there's always a seat for you. Thanks again, and have a great day.